Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. After the meeting between U.S. Presidential Envoy Vitorkov and Russian President Putin, news emerged that the U.S. and Russian leaders may hold a summit. Will Trump's promise to broker a ceasefire be fulfilled soon? The Wall Street Journal published an article on August 8 pointing out that hope is still slim. Analysts point out that how to deal with Putin, the sincerity of Russia's ceasefire intentions, and whether to abandon the peace process if the talks end in failure are all challenges Trump faces. Several U.S. government officials also revealed details of multiple phone calls between the U.S. and Russian presidents. They described Putin as clear-minded and endlessly talkative, while Trump, who is usually persistent and enjoys strategizing, could only listen to Putin at these times. The article says that brokering a ceasefire from Putin on the Ukraine issue is the diplomatic victory Trump dreams of. After months of negotiations, the two leaders could meet as soon as next week to seek a peace agreement. But there are still differences between them. Trump has already urged Putin to agree to a ceasefire, but he isn't very interested in the specific details of the agreement. To influence Putin, Trump has also taken a more confrontational approach by threatening to sanction countries that buy Russian energy. He has targeted India, a major buyer of Russian oil, by imposing a 50% tariff on Indian goods exported to the U.S. Although Trump has also mentioned the possibility of imposing secondary sanctions on China for buying Russian oil, he hasn't provided any specific details. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Gui Jiaquan responded by saying that China's position on this issue has always been consistent and clear, and that it is legitimate and lawful for China to conduct normal economic, trade, and energy cooperation with countries around the world, including Russia. China will continue to take reasonable measures to secure its energy supply based on its own national interests. Before the U.S.-Russia summit, Putin first had a private discussion with China. On August 8, President Xi Jinping had a phone call with Russian President Putin at Putin's request. Putin shared Russia's views on the current situation of the Ukraine crisis and the recent contacts and communications between Russia and the U.S. He expressed Russia's high appreciation for China's constructive role in seeking a political solution to the crisis, emphasized that the comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination between Russia and China will not change under any circumstances, and stated that Russia is willing to maintain close communication with China. President Xi elaborated on China's principled position, pointing out that complex problems do not have simple solutions. No matter how the situation changes, China will stick to its consistent stance and continue to promote peace and encourage dialogue. China is pleased to see Russia and the U.S. maintain contact, improve their relations, and advance the political resolution process of the Ukraine crisis. The two heads of state also spoke highly of the high level of political mutual trust and strategic coordination between China and Russia, and agreed to work together to further advance the development of bilateral relations. Both sides will work closely together to prepare for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin, aiming to make it a friendly, united, and fruitful event, and to promote the high-quality development of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. To briefly sum up, first, there are some details worth noting about the China-Russia phone call on the eve of the U.S.-Russia summit. For example, President Xi took the call at Putin's request, meaning Putin proactively wanted to brief China. Clearly, Putin does not have high expectations for the U.S.-Russia summit, nor does he want China to misunderstand, so he informed China in advance. Second, Trump wants to disrupt the global order so the U.S. can profit from it. U.S. allies like the EU, Japan, South Korea, and India have all been thrown into confusion, but China has the strength to counteract these moves. The U.S. appears especially calm, but in reality, it's because China is well prepared and ready to respond to any move. Third, Trump is eager to make a breakthrough on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, so he is putting pressure on Russia and even bringing up the issue of India and China buying Russian energy. However, since China has effective countermeasures against the U.S., such as its trump card of rare earths, Trump has only made verbal threats about imposing tariffs on China without providing any details. Instead, he has actually imposed additional tariffs on India. From this, we can also see that Trump is a typical bully who picks on the weak and fears the strong. In addition, while Trump's tariff war has successfully squeezed his own followers like the EU, Japan, and South Korea, is it actually more beneficial or harmful to American industries? There is still a lot of controversy about this within the United States. On August 7th, the American media outlet The Wall Street Journal published an article pointing out that Trump's tariff war has already caused nearly $12 billion in losses for global car manufacturers, making it the biggest blow they've faced since the pandemic. What's even more worrying is that this might just be the beginning. According to reports, in addition to the ongoing tariff costs, car manufacturers from the US, Japan, South Korea, and Europe also have to deal with years of factory upgrades and supply chain adjustments to adapt to the new reality. Previously, faced with both pressure and incentives from the Biden and Trump administrations, these car companies promised to manufacture in the US and have already invested heavily in electric vehicle production. The report also mentioned that the obvious responses to tariffs are to raise prices and shift production lines to the US. But for car manufacturers, both of these actions are difficult to implement quickly and may further drag them down in the coming years. According to statistics from the Wall Street Journal, data shows that the total impact of Trump's tariffs has already reached $11.8 billion, and the losses are still ongoing. On August 7th, Toyota stated that tariffs have reduced their operating profit by about $3 billion, which is the largest loss reported by any car manufacturer so far. By the end of the fiscal year ending next March, tariffs will create a burden of $9.5 billion, causing their net profit to be expected to drop by 44%. General Motors, on the other hand, said that its tariff costs are expected to be between $4 billion and $5 billion, second only to Toyota among the major car manufacturers. For the world's top 10 car manufacturers, excluding Chinese automakers, it is currently expected that this year's net profit will drop by about a quarter, reaching the lowest level since 2020, when the pandemic caused factory shutdowns and cash flow dried up. When Trump announced a 25% tariff on cars this March, many analysts thought automakers would raise prices to make up for the costs, but that hasn't happened yet. Most car companies have chosen to reduce discounts rather than significantly increase prices. According to reports, automakers need to strike a balance between protecting profit margins and the risks of losing sales due to high prices, or becoming targets of social media backlash. Jefferies analyst Ho Chowie said that no one is in a hurry to act before others do, as they're all afraid of being targeted by a malicious tweet from President Trump. Toyota's chief financial officer said that ultimately, the key is what price customers want for the product. In addition, the White House has also introduced some policies that partially offset profit losses, giving automakers more reasons to wait and see and hold their positions. For example, the Trump administration previously rolled back climate regulations, and under a recently passed major bill, starting next year, many buyers of American-made cars can deduct up to $10,000 in loan interest from their taxes. According to reports, Trump raised tariffs in order to pressure automakers to increase production in the United States. The report mentioned that companies like General Motors, Nissan, and Honda have no choice but to expand their production lines in the U.S. General Motors announced it will invest $4 billion to increase production in the U.S., and will move production of 2 Chevrolet models currently made in Mexico to U.S. factories in 2027. In March, Hyundai announced a $21 billion investment in the U.S. This May, Mercedes-Benz said it would move the production line for its midsize SUV GLC from Europe to Alabama. This German carmaker ultimately decided to produce more cars in its 2 major markets, the US and China, at the expense of its traditional German export hub. However, the report points out that in most cases, automakers do not produce the same model at 2 different locations, which limits their flexibility to adjust without making large-scale investments to overhaul their factories. For car companies, large-scale investments take years to complete and may face different political environments by then. There are also skeptics who believe that Trump's tariff threats will only slightly change the auto industry, and that the key factor determining global automakers' investments is a healthy consumer economy, not political factors. According to the Wall Street Journal, the 3 major auto markets, North America, Europe, and China, are increasingly segmented due to different regulations, technologies, and consumer preferences, prompting automakers to choose local design and manufacturing. Besides reducing logistics and tariff costs and hedging currency risks, making cars locally also helps manufacturers stay close to regulators and consumers. Nowadays, consumers increasingly want different products in different regions. Volvo Cars CEO Samuelson said that in the era of globalization and global car models, everything was on an equal footing. But in his view, that era is coming to an end, and we are entering a more regionalized world. The report points out that electric vehicles have already become mainstream in China and are steadily advancing in Europe, while in the United States, they have been downgraded due to policy reasons. Brent, head of automotive at AlixPartners, said that autonomous vehicles may also face different standards around the world, especially in the high-end market. In the past, there was a kind of globalized taste, where one car could suit buyers everywhere, but that situation is now falling apart. To sum up simply, Trump wants to force industries to return to the US, and the automotive industry is one of the more likely candidates. However, global car companies, including American ones, will have to face high costs and an uncertain future. Chinese car companies, on the other hand, are rising stars and have not relied on the US market to achieve their success. In the global reshuffling of the automotive industry, Chinese car companies actually have a bigger advantage.